We are here on Earth to lead our lives because our consciousness must be developed so that it gathers knowledge, gathers wisdom, builds up love, peace, freedom, and harmony. The human exists in the material life on Earth in order to learn, just as other humankinds do on other worlds in the entire universe.
Good evening. We learned today there's water on Mars, a headline unthinkable for generations in this country, especially for the millions of us who grew up wondering what was up there.
Discovering a planet similar to Earth has long been an obsession for astronomers. Now NASA scientists say they have found the closest thing yet. Kepler 22b orbits a star not unlike our own Sun, and in theory at least is well positioned to have liquid water on its surface.
For the first time ever, astronomers have mapped the clouds on a planet in another solar system.
Scientists have taken an important step in the search for life on a planet dozens of light years away.
We found that the atmosphere contains methane and significant quantities of water. It's the first time an organic molecule has been observed or discovered in an atmosphere of an extrasolar planet.
Scientists say they've discovered what could be the most Earth-like planet ever found, and they say it could sustain life.
Astronomers using ESO's leading exoplanet hunter, HARPS, have today announced more than 50 newly discovered planets around other stars. Among these are many rocky planets not much heavier than the Earth. One of them in particular orbits within the habitable zone around its star.
A new study of NASA data says there are billions and billions of planets similar to Earth and the Milky Way alone.
Astronomers using ESO's world-leading HARPS instrument have discovered a planetary system containing at least 5 planets, orbiting the Sun-like star HD 10180. The researchers also believe the system has 2 other planets, one of which would have the lowest mass ever found, making the system similar to our own solar system in terms of the number of planets.
I'm absolutely sure that we are not alone in this universe.
A group calling itself the Disclosure Project is in Washington this week, calling on Congress to hold public hearings on UFOs.
Is there really life on other planets?
Two members plan to do with their information. They hope Congress and President Bush take notice.
Before a crowd of believers and skeptics, with cameras rolling, members of a group calling itself the Disclosure Project stood up one by one to tell personal experiences involving what they say are UFOs.
A group gathering here in Washington to talk about their UFO sightings, but this apparently is no crackpot convention. Former high-level government and military officials are among those sharing what they've seen in the skies.
We want the United States government to stop perpetuating the myth that all UFOs can be explained away in down-to-earth and conventional terms. Instead, our country needs to reopen its official investigation that it shut down in 1969.
We had ground visual, ground radar, airborne visual, and airborne radar confirmation of some of these sightings.
By the way, there have even been some UFO sightings reported right here in the nation's capital. There was a flurry of them back in July of 1952 when the Air Force investigated but was never able to solve or prove anything. Take a look at these headlines. Ariel, what's its buzz? D.C. again. Air Force after DC saucers, jets ready to chase lights, jets ordered to hunt down flying saucers. There was a lot of hype, a lot of excitement back in 1952.
A lot of people have been talking recently about some very strange lights in the sky that were caught on videotape. And see for yourself. This is the footage that's getting thousands of hits every day on YouTube. The person who claims to have shot the footage says it shows a triangle-shaped object moving at incredible speed in the skies over Dublin, Ireland.
Well, joining me from our New York studio is the author, Leslie Kane. She's also the Director of Investigations for the Coalition for the Freedom of Information. Leslie, thanks so much for joining us. I want to ask you first, what are you trying to achieve with this book here?
Well, Alana, thanks for having me on. It's great to be with you. The main thing I'm trying to do is establish credibility for this subject, which is so misunderstood by the general public and by the culture at large. And the point is that I am bringing forward extremely high-level officials from around the world that have documented, as you said earlier, official events, officially documented events where these physical objects are present. They show up on radar, they leave marks on the ground. There is a physical phenomenon in the sky.
A UFO in China's skies forced Zhoushan Airport to stop operations on July 7th. Outbound flights were grounded after the unidentified flying object was detected by a flight crew. The incident has captured the attention of Chinese media, and theories about the UFO's identity are burning up on the internet as well. They include everything from a hidden U.S. bomber to an elaborate man-made hoax. For now, the UFO continues to be a mystery.
Probably won't be seeing aliens en masse anytime soon, but the Vatican's chief astronomer does say that there could exist other forms of life outside Earth, and he says if they do exist, they are God's creatures.
8, 9, 10, 11, contando toda la cola. Ay.
It's time to find out what the truth really is that's out there. We ought to do it really because it's right. We ought to do it because the American people, quite frankly, can handle the truth. And we ought to do it because it's the law.
America and Britain have made it very clear to a lot of countries who have the same sort of sightings and the same resources that this is something that they better not let out, not until we say it's okay.
We have over 450 military and intelligence witnesses. They range from generals and brigadier generals to air traffic controllers and strategic air command personnel in the Air Force to civilian people in the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, to astronauts and cosmonauts.
As a skeptic, I had a lot of questions. So I first asked him if he had one incident that he would pick to convince people like me that aliens have indeed made contact with Earth.
That's a tough question because, you know, it's the weight of the evidence, and it's like J. Allen Hynek, who is the Air Force Blue Book guy. He said, look, he says, it's an embarrassment of riches. We have so much material. We have so much information. But if you take for one case that we have in the Disclosure Project, and that's a man who was the senior guy at the FAA, and they were tracking this object over Alaska, and it was at one point in the sky, and in one sweep of the radar, it would be 40, 50 miles away, moving completely non-linearly, not like an airplane. And we have the radar tape, we have the pilot report, we have all the evidence from the airline and the government. And this whistleblower who came forward, John Callahan, he said, I'm one of the senior officials in the government that not only have the evidence, but was part of a cover-up to keep the American people ignorant about it.
bueno, זה יורד למטה. Whoa!
I think nighttime would be lovely, but is that a UFO? Amazing. Holy shit. Oh, is that cool? You can almost hardly look at it.
Hello again, everybody. This is Berlin, Germany, March 2nd, 2010. Looking here at Grellestraße. There's this bright object in the sky. Just caught my attention, and I'll try to focus in. There's all kinds of motions now.
If you had been here 10 years ago and standing out here and looking up there at the lights and the view, you would have been astounded. You would have been amazed.
Governor Simonton is referring to what is now known as the Phoenix Lights, an object videotaped by many and seen by thousands over several nights in the Arizona sky in 1997.
Major sighting here.
It was described by witnesses as larger than a football field and silent.
And I suspect that unless the Defense Department proves us otherwise, that it was probably some form of an alien spacecraft.
What follows is a celestial phenomenon that is attracting attention worldwide. It concerns ongoing sightings of luminous star-like phenomenon, too large and bright to be confused with a known celestial body. while exhibiting changes in size, location, color, and magnitude, as well as duration. These attributes rule out the possibility of near-Earth objects, asteroids, comets, and supernovas as potential sources. Beginning in January 2009, sightings have been reported from Norway, Costa Rica, the United States, Ukraine, Japan, scores of countries to date. There are many newspaper and TV reports.
UFO sightings may be the stuff of films and TV shows, but they keep turning up.
Edivaldo, noites de domingo e objeto voador não identificado chamou a atenção de moradores do conjunto universitário.
Cuando hay una luz muy grande, muy resplandeciente, que no es normal verla en el cielo.
Norwegian authorities are investigating strange lights seen in the Arctic sky. The spiralling white light was seen for several minutes Wednesday morning. Locals say the light appeared to be bigger than the moon. Thousands of Norwegians bombarded the Meteorological Institute to ask what that light could have possibly been. Some feared it could have been a meteor, others a black hole, and there are even those that thought it could be aliens.
A strange spiralling white light was spotted in the early morning sky over Sydney, with even sceptical witnesses wondering if it was a UFO. The unusual sight was recorded by hundreds of people from Victoria north to Queensland.
It appeared just before 6 o'clock this morning.
That's a UFO, I'm telling you.
A spiral in the sky around a bright light.
I mean, what in the hell was it?
Malcolm Richardson saw it move from west to east, disappearing into the sunrise.
It was actually rotating and throwing off a vapour, glowing vapour, in a spiral that was getting bigger.
He was not alone. Early morning surfers, farmers, truckies grabbed their phone cameras, still cameras, web cameras.
It's just the most astounding thing. I'm looking at the window now trying to see if it's come back or not.
From central Queensland to Melbourne, along the east coast, people shared a close encounter.
And this thing was moving at a rapid rate.
I thought, gee, that's so unusual.
I was just dumbfounded.
The Bureau of Meteorology confirmed it wasn't a weather phenomenon. Air traffic control say they didn't pick up their radar, and that looks 14 kilometres into the sky. And the radio telescopes near Canberra confirmed that it wasn't in deep space, so that leaves Earth's orbit.
I'm convinced after studies since 1958 that the evidence is overwhelming that planet Earth is being visited by intelligently controlled extraterrestrial spacecraft.
Even though there's clearly no evidence, I want to emphasize this, that these extraterrestrial civilizations are hostile towards us, I think they're very worried about our hostility. I always turn this on its head, because most of these sort of documentaries are always like alien invasion and all this stuff. No. The issue is that, you know, if they were hostile, we would know it by now. It's clear to me that what's going on is that they're very concerned that at the time that humanity reached the ability to go into space, early space exploration, 50s, we also had already developed weapons of mass destruction and thermonuclear and hydrogen bombs and stuff. And that the coincidence of that, the coming together of those two things, put a big red flag over Earth. And so if you look at the databases from the 50s, 60s, 70s on forward, not only in the United States, but in Great Britain, in the Soviet Union, in China, that wherever we had space, aerospace, and nuclear facilities, there were a lot of these so-called UFOs being seen.
There were documents that I have seen that refer to the Roosevelt having several instances of UFO flyovers, and particularly after they took on board nuclear weapons.
Now, they are said to be able to cross galaxies, but people who believe they're out there want to know why aliens want to visit Earth. A group of former U.S. servicemen is convinced extraterrestrials are interfering with nuclear weapons, as RT's Cedric Moon explains.
Our missiles began going into what's called a no-go condition, or unlaunchable. Essentially, they were disabled.
Detailed in this report, full of court-sanctioned sworn affidavits.
The witnesses have described these craft as disc-shaped, or cylindrical-shaped, or spherical.
These are men who might know what may have gone on. They're former Air Force missile launch officers, missile base officers, who say UFO spaceships, flying saucers, make nuclear weapon systems go haywire.
Houston, how do you read? Loud and clear. 7, go ahead. I'll talk to you at 10 o'clock high. This is Houston. Say again, 7. I'll talk to you at 10 o'clock high.
An object which is in the same place all the time and appears to be tumbling. Well, we've had it ever since yesterday. It just seems to be tagging along with us.
What I tell people is that the reason it's hidden in plain sight is that the establishment doesn't want people to know, not so much that there's life out in the universe. There's 2/3 of the public believes that there's intelligent life somewhere out there. Over half believe we've been visited, all right? And this is consistent in polls. It's the technology. How do you put something like that up in the sky and move it, no sound, completely quiet? You're not dealing with fossil fuels. You're not dealing with conventional rockets. You're dealing with an entirely new area of physics, which if it was disclosed would mean the end of big oil, the end of the petrodollar, the end of public utilities as we know it. It would be an entirely new energy paradigm. And so the macroeconomic power behind the secrecy is what no one's been looking at. And this is what the Minister of Defense of Canada and I did a press conference on a few years ago, Paul Hellyer, and I did a press conference about this, that it's the energy and technology part of this story that has led to the extreme secrecy and also the extreme ridicule.
Whatever activity is going on, to the extent that it is a clandestine group, a quasi-government group, a quasi-private group, it is without any type, as far as I can tell, of high-level government oversight. And that is a great concern.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
Above the skies of Northeast and East El Paso tonight, a sight that was a little more than stunning. This is what one of our photographers, Ram Moreno, caught on video. One solitary light that appears to be falling in the sky. But that light suddenly breaks apart into 2, then 3 separate lights. Those lights then just freeze in the air and begin to hover. Eventually, a 4th light can be seen. Then the lights appear to be hovering and then moving in a strange pattern. Then they all disappear. We received a lot of phone calls into our newsroom tonight from people in the northeast part of town and on the east side, all of them wanting to know what was going on. And the descriptions from everyone calling basically the same. One caller thought a plane was falling. Another thought it was a meteorite. Others, though, said it looked like a UFO. Now, you want to get really creepy? Check this video out. Just 2 days ago, in the sky above Manhattan, people froze on the street there as they saw these 3 lights hovering in the middle of the day. And check this out. The 3 lights are close to each other, then spread out into this triangle pattern. Now, look at the patterns side by side. This from Manhattan and the other tonight in El Paso. I gotta tell you, they do look eerily similar.
crop circles start coming every April, and we stick the pins in the map exactly where the crop circles are and put numbers on the pins. So it seemed almost impossible that that could be the work of, you know, a few humans going out and smashing the plants down with pieces of wood. It just seemed far too sophisticated, far too perfect.
The most important question for crop circle research is whether there is a real phenomenon, meaning something not made by the hand of man. And we've come to the conclusion that yes, this is clearly a real phenomenon, and it can be proven. There is a whole range of indicators and hard evidence that satisfies even the most stringent scientific standards.
We started testing crop circles all over the world. By now, I would guess that at least 350, maybe, I haven't counted them, maybe it's 400, that we have sampled in 8 different countries, 8 or 9 now, including Australia, Israel, Canada, the United States, Germany, the Netherlands.
We can prove that there is apparently a rotational force. This rotational force contains an energy component that works like a microwave. We can reproduce many of the changes which take place in the plants and soils by means of microwave radiation.
The microwaves heating the moisture inside turns to steam, and as it does so, it has to escape. Well, if the plants are young and pliable, the outer fibers are pliable, the steam escapes by stretching the nodes. That's how you get the elongated nodes. If the energy is extremely intense, and or if the crop is old and the fibers are tough, then it can't get out by stretching it because the fibers won't stretch, or it's just too much energy. Then it blows a hole right out at the node.
If we see it as a simple circle, the extent of the damage to the plants decreases as you go from the center to the edge. And that's exciting because we can, in principle, deliver the proof that we're dealing with electromagnetic radiation here. The so-called Beer-Lambert principle, the effect of electromagnetic radiation on matter.
What we've discovered now in formation after formation all over the world are these tiny little rounded particles, but the fact that they're perfectly spherical indicates they were in a molten state, because that's how you get the spheres. Right. And furthermore, we not only find them, we find them deposited in very unusual ways. Sometimes they're deposited at the edges of the circle only. Sometimes they're deposited very definitely in the middle. And even more interestingly, sometimes there's a linear deposition, meaning that you'll have perhaps the least at the center, a little bit more 5 feet out, a little bit more 10 feet out, until you get the greatest amount at the edge, but in a clear linear progression.
We have also found changes in the soils which we have analyzed. In the soil of the crop circle, there is a distinctly higher concentration of magnetic material compared to the control samples. And this material can also be shown to be distributed centrifugally from the center outwards. Additionally, we have analyzed the crystalline structures of the aluminium oxide minerals in various crop circles. It's well known that they expand under certain natural circumstances, and limiting ourselves only to the surface soil of the crop circles, we have found these crystalline structures changed in such a way that we could normally only explain it as a result of extremely high pressure. But you can rule this out because this type of pressure on the plants can't be proven. They weren't damaged, and the temperatures that these plants would have had to have been exposed to would be so high that sustained exposure would have incinerated the field.
I first read about UFOs in Adamsky's books Saucers Have Landed was a book in which he wrote the last chapter. And the last chapter was about his experience of meeting a Venusian, as he made known, in the Arizona desert. The fact that people from other planets were concerned enough to visit this planet was interesting, but the nature of the concern was much more interesting. Their concern was that we should not destroy ourselves. It was a philosophical, spiritual discourse which he had with the Venusian master. And that's what really impressed me about the book. In the first time I heard these, before I read the Adamsky books, the first time I heard or read anything about them, I believed that they were probably either American or Russian special planes that they were experimenting with. Until I read the Adamsky book, and then it became clear that there was something else going on, that they were perhaps from elsewhere.
Well, while I was attending Northrop Aeronautical Institute and working for Douglas Aircraft in El Segundo, California, I had heard about George Adamsky, and one of the Sunday newspapers, he had his story and his pictures of contacts, plus pictures of his ships. Well, I had, by that time, seen so many during the day and the night that I felt I'd like to go up and meet this gentleman. On the weekend, he would entertain people who would come to see him, military people, engineers, scientists, people from all walks of life. He had taken some beautiful pictures of the scout craft as well as the carrier ships. I went up to see him. He had a 6-inch telescope that he used to take the pictures of the flying saucers. And in using that scope, when I finished, I was just about to take my eye off the eyepiece when there was a blue-white streak that went by, and I jerked my head up to see if I could see it, and I didn't. And I looked at his 15-inch telescope dome, which was a couple of 100 yards from his house. And there was a big flare-up blue-white light, and then it kind of closed back down. No noise. First I thought it was an explosion, but it was a little slower than that. And there was an elliptical flying saucer. It looked to me like it was hovering above the ground. So I heard it increase its frequency, and it got brighter and brighter, and it was really pretty hard to look at. And it shot straight up until it looked like one of the stars.
In my experience, what we call UFOs, the flying saucers, come from mainly Mars and Venus. A few other planets like Jupiter, Mercury are involved. The beings on Mars and Venus and the other planets are on the 4 higher levels of the physical. So that if you went to Mars or Venus, you would see nobody, but nevertheless, they are in the still physical matter and have bodies made of that subtle, finer physical matter, to which we give the term etheric.
Through the 50s and 60s and 70s, we referred to aliens as extraterrestrials. But now that science has been catching up with us to a certain degree, we have changed our definition of an alien. It's probably more accurate to call them extra-dimensional beings, because that would explain their ability to traverse vast distances.
Unless one understands that the reality of the etheric levels of energy, these finer, subtler levels of matter, you cannot begin to understand the UFO phenomenon, and you cannot understand the creation of crop circles, because they're all related. The crop circles are created by the people mainly from Mars and Venus. And what they are doing is replicating the magnetic field which surrounds every planet. It is made of energy, magnetic energy, which goes in lines and crisscrosses, and where these lines cross, eventually is formed a vortice, a kind of chakra, a force center. And what the space people, mainly from Mars and Venus, as I say, are doing with the crop circles is replicating on the physical, the dense physical plane, these magnetic vortices in our planetary magnetic field. They do this in order to make the foundation on the physical plane of a new type of energy, a new type of technology using that energy, which eventually will be developed on this planet.
The place is Switzerland. The time, early spring, 1978. An unusual team of people makes its way to a secret rendezvous. Their goal, a tiny mountain village named Schmidrutti. They were brought here by Wendell Stevens, retired Air Force colonel and for over 20 years one of the world's leading UFO investigators. Their mission, to check out one of the most remarkable UFO cases ever reported. One that has been called alternately too good to be true, the hoax of the century, or the start of a new age for humankind.
What makes the case so special in your mind? Why bring us all the way up here from Arizona?
Man, up to now we've been dealing with just the tip of the iceberg. There's a mountain of evidence here. There's other witnesses, there's lots of photographs, there's recorded sounds, there's landing tracks, a lot of things in this case. Bigger than any case I ever saw before.
Thus begins what was to become a 5-year investigation. His name is Edward Meyer. He is called Billy, an old nickname that sprang from his fondness for heroes of the American West. He is a farmer. He claims he has been in contact with beings from another world. He also claims to have proof of these contacts.
How did it happen? What made you go outside into the forest?
I got something like a very nice voice in my head. I heard something to leave the house, to go out and to take a photo camera with me. When I was far upsides from the village, I heard a singing noise in the sky. And when I was looking up there, I have seen a disc. Then slowly, it comes lower and lower and set it down between the white trees and the forest there behind.
Meyer later photographs the impressions left by the disc's tripod landing gear. The grass has been pressed and swirled in a counterclockwise direction. Even a year later, the grass has not sprung back, but Meyer notes that the impressions swarm with insect life.
Then I have seen a person who came out of the disc.
Person came out?
Yeah. And when the person came out of the left side of the trees there, I have seen that it is a woman.
Mr. Meyer, what did they look like?
She looks like a human from this earth. Like you, like I, like human beings from this earth.
Where do they come from, Mr. Meyer?
They shall be coming from the star picture of the Pleiades.
The Pleiades, a bright star cluster some 500 light years from Earth. Although the cluster consists of hundreds of stars, 7 stand out clearly to the naked eye. The Greeks call them the nymphs of heaven. We call them the 7 sisters.
Billy, how many sightings have you had here?
On this place I had one...
Meyer takes the investigators to over a dozen sites, describing the craft, which he calls beam ships. With a film camera on a tripod, Meyer can shoot stills with his 35mm camera at the same time.
And then I can start to film.
So we want to thank you for all your time and trouble.
Oh, yeah. Okay, just a moment, wait.
Hey?
I have here something. Here.
What's this?
Metal samples.
Metal samples?
Yeah.
Where did you get these?
I got it from Symbiose, and she brought them from Era.
Are they extraterrestrial?
Metal samples. The kind of hard evidence Stevens had hoped for.
Picked an area here that...
Next, Stevens takes the metal fragments to be examined under the electronic spectrometer to determine their
a typical
components.
looking area in the sample.
Because of the unusual nature of the findings, the fragments are given to chemist Marcel Vogel, an expert in crystalline structures and inventor of many substances used in computer components.
The first specimen I looked at is a metal specimen, which I classified as F1. This is the appearance that it looked at, rather golden colored on one side, silvery colored here. We look at it here, this same area here, under polarized light. What is unusual of this small specimen is both highly crystalline nature, and suddenly we come to a metal section as we see here, and it showed a combination of metals that I've not encountered in any normal bit of metallurgy, both crystalline deposits and metal. And we find that in this area there is evidence of machining, that there are striations which look like the sample has been worked mechanically. Now, we, with any technology that I know of, could not achieve this on this Earth plane. I could not explain the type of material that I have and its discreteness by any known combination of materials. I could not put it together myself as a scientist. It's also a challenge because I showed it to one of my friends who was a metallurgist, and he shook his head. He said, I don't see how it can be put together.
These people will continue zipping through our atmosphere, checking nuclear plants and so forth and so on. They have never been hostile. They pose no air security problems, whatever. The Air Force knows this, and the Air Force has made statements to that effect, that UFOs pose no threat.
Physically, they're humanoid. Their skin is as white as a piece of paper. Throughout much of their adult life, they're the same height that I am, 5'11", 6 feet tall. Their eyes are perhaps twice as large as ours. They're typically blue eyes with white pupils. Although when they get older, especially the men, their eyes take on a pink shade. Their eyes stretch further around the sides of their head than human eyes do, and their ears and their nose are only about half the size of human ears and noses, and their ears lay back along the side of their head more than a human does. Their lips are not as prominent as humans, and they don't have teeth, they just have ridges, because they're plant eaters, they don't eat meat.
Words you were never meant to hear.
It's clear we're dealing with a cosmic Watergate.
This is the biggest secret in the history of the human race, the known modern history of government.
Photos you were never meant to see. Video you never knew existed. People you were never meant to meet.
Essentially everything that you would want to know has been covered up.
Things you were never meant to know about.
Out in the universe, they were horrified. They said, oh my God, the kids have found the matches.
We are being engaged as a planet and as a species by other beings.
The biggest secret in the history of our world is about to be revealed.
We're dealing with a big, big story. It's not just them. As I said, if it was that simple, it would probably been out some time back. It's really about us.